Edward Soldier here, and I'm back to talk about Masters of the Air Season 1, Episode 8, and my thoughts on this episode. Disappointing. Very disappointing. The first episode that I have been absolutely gutted with what we got. This episode had way too much stuff in it. You had Tuskegee Airmen, D-Day, two small stories that personally I could do without at this point, and the camp story, which I get is important, but what was the point of this episode? Now, what I mean to say is, why was everything so rushed? Getting the Tuskegee Airmen mentioned, rushed. D-Day, rushed. These are two massive historical events. D-Day and the Tuskegee Airmen. I get D-Day is the more important story because of how, it is in our history. This is the biggest military operation in, human history. I get that. But the Tuskegee Airmen are an important story as well. So why are we jamming them both together and basically taking away so much potential from both stories? Why were these two not split up into two separate episodes? That's what should have happened. I've watched the Red Tails, George Lucas's movie about the Tuskegee Airmen. That's an amazing film. So I was expecting 100 times more than this. So, I am just massively gutted. Like, why is there such a rush to get to the end? I know next week's episode is the final episode, but it didn't have to be. This is bloody Apple. Why are we only getting 9 episodes? Why didn't we have 12 episodes? Why did we not have more focus on these two stories and give them their own episodes? This is absolutely ridiculous. That you do that to D-Day, that's how quick it was? Listen, the acting is fantastic, okay? It is. It's always fantastic. But the writing in this episode, not at all. Not at all. It was all over the place. And the biggest issue, and I'll say it again, it was rushed to get to the finish. I don't get it. You didn't need to do this. If you're going to have an episode that mentions D-Day, then fucking do D-Day. Oh my god. And the spy story? That went nowhere. D-Day, a lot of spies were doing a lot of shit that day. They were blowing shit up with the French resistance. We couldn't have seen that. I get the Luftwaffe weren't involved in D-Day because, the Nazis pretty much got caught with their trousers down at that point. I shouldn't say the N-word because that will get my video suffocated. Sorry. I have to say German, otherwise I get screwed over. Sorry. But I don't get it. You didn't need to rush this episode. You didn't need to do that. The Tuskegee Airmen should have had their own episode. I'm not asking for an entire fucking show about them. I've got the movie. But if you're going to bring in a very important part of the war, and again, they are, then you don't just do that in 5 fucking minutes, which is what they fucking did in this episode. But why? Oh, I'm just absolutely disappointed. Again, this show has been great all the way through. That's why this episode has just come from left field for me. You didn't need to rush this. You could have taken your time. And if you are going to do this ridiculous, story together, okay, then you've got to be fucking give it both important stories enough time. Like, I don't know. I got to go into this in the spoiler section, but it is just absolutely disappointing. How did you let this happen, Apple? To the people writing this, like, all the way through you've been great, and just to stumble near the end? Jesus. And the Buck and Bucky stuff. Okay, I get it. But can we move it along now? Yeah. I'm just gutted. I am. Let's get to the review. What do I give this out of 10? I mean, it wasn't terrible. There was one fight scene I liked with the Tuskegee Airmen. That was okay. I'll give it a 5. A 5 out of 10. That's the best I can do for this. It's just, this was a mistake. They should have put 2 extra episodes in the season for this. This is not what you do with 2 important events like this. Yeah, 5 out of 10. Let's get to the spoilers now. If you don't want to hear spoilers, leave in 3, 2, 1. So, the episode starts off with a bombing mission by the Tuskegee Airmen on a German base. They blow it up. They're using old P-50s, I think that's what they're called, and it's a successful mission, and they head back. We get the credit scene, then we're introduced to Cross, who is dealing with the fact that he is managing the 100th bomber targets for the D-Day landings. So it's a very important couple of days for him and for everybody. The base is on lockdown. We see Rosie telling the men about D-Day and when it's going to happen. And when I first saw this scene, I was like really getting amped up for a great fucking couple of minutes of seeing the D-Day landings and seeing the bombing runs. And that's what I thought we were going to get. Unfortunately, we did not. So Cross is pretty much working himself to death. He's not getting any sleep. He's focused on his work. He's taking pills to keep himself alert so he doesn't fall asleep. And, well, that kind of goes wrong because he ends up collapsing and being unconscious for 3 days. Whilst he's in that coma, we go to Sandra, I think that's what her name is. She's a spy, so she's in France trying to help the French resistance with finding targets for the D-Day landings. At least that's what I think she's there to do. We don't really get any clarification on what she's doing in France. Which, okay, but why are we focusing on her then at all? She's doing a couple of missions in France. You could have just done that off screen. You didn't need to waste any time with that. Unless you were going to show us what she was doing in France, like of importance, maybe setting bombs or, directing the French resistance to targets. That would have been interesting to see. What do we get? She just goes to some art gallery and just hands over a couple of pictures to an English guy and a French guy. That's all she does in this episode. So that's her end of the episode done. And when we meet back up with Cross, who eventually wakes up from his coma, it's been 3 days and D-Day's over. D-Day's over. And all we get is Rosie telling us what happened and getting one scene of the bombers and the ships. That's what you do for D-Day. The most important fucking military operation in world history, and that's how much time you give D-Day. I get the Luftwaffe were not involved. I get it's probably not that exciting to show bombers just dropping bombs on stationary targets. But come on. A 2-second scene of D-Day Are you out of your fucking mind? Like, this is supposed to be about the bombers. And D-Day, they did do shit. The biggest fucking air operation, again, in human history, and we get 2 seconds of it. This was ridiculous. Like, this show has been great all the way through. So I was expecting we would get a fantastic D-Day episode. I was wrong. This was stupid. This was rushed. And again, I don't know why it's rushed. You didn't need to do that. So, when that scene's over, we head back to the Tuskegee Airmen, and the guys are having drinks, celebrating their latest mission, where we're introduced to Jefferson, a black lieutenant who is, kind of struggling, I think, because he's drawing on the table, and probably to deal with the war or whatever. We don't really get that much again about him. That's what I mean by they should have had their own episode, because I don't remember any of the other guys. It was that quick. Like, the only reason I know about Jefferson is that he's the only Tuskegee Airman who talks the most. That's it. So whilst he's having a drink, the commander of the Tuskegee Airmen comes in, talks to the other guy in charge, and mentions how, that pilots in this group should be like captains and majors by now because of the amount of missions the Tuskegee Airmen did, which was a lot. If you know the history of the Tuskegee Airmen, they did a fuck ton of work when they were dealing with a lot of racism as well. I'll give credit to the episode. They didn't go that hard on the racism stuff. I mean, they did bring it up certain times, and I will give them credit for not going so hard on it, but they did go a little bit too easy on it as well at the same time. Which again, give them their own episode, and you could have gone into more detail about this. Listen, it was a racist time, and the way they were treated wasn't exactly great. It was racist, so, and when you know how much they did for their country, that does piss you off. That pisses me off. Again, I've watched the Red Tails, which is kind of what pisses me off. It's like that, I get it, that's a film, I get it, but just give them an episode. I'm not asking for a series. I would probably like a Red Tails series. They're a very interesting group. Like the 100th from a group. So, yeah, anyway, again, I'm just disappointed. This episode could have been amazing if they put more focus on the two stories, not on just forcing them together for no reason. Such a missed opportunity, man. We're also introduced to another character which I didn't catch his name, but I know the actor because I do Doctor Who reviews, and his name is Ncuti Gatwa. And he was okay in this episode, I guess. I mean, when he was on screen, he was fine. Not really much I can say about him. Again, he's on the screen for about 2 fucking minutes. So, whilst having a drink, the two commanding officers of the Tuskegee Airmen go outside. They mention the fact their planes are too old. And then in the next scene, they get to all the new P-51s. Okay. No story about why they get the P-51s. No story about the fact that the Tuskegee Airmen were literally the most dedicated P-51 air group that defended the shitload of bombers. Again, you're doing a fucking story about the bomber forces and the Tuskegee Airmen being one of the most dedicated fucking defense groups. You fucking serious? You don't do an episode on that. You just... absolutely disappointing. Seriously. So they get their mission by the head of the Tuskegee Airmen. He tells them they are going to attack some radar towers to give the Americans, British, some cover, and to disable the Germans' ability to repel an Allied invasion, or at least an Allied assault, deeper into Italy or deeper into Germany, or whatever. So they go on the mission. One of the pilots mentions the fact that the distance they are being asked to travel is way too long. They don't have enough fuel, even with the added tanks on the planes. But the commanding officer just tells them, do the best you can. Use up every drop of the fuel and complete the mission. So they all say yes, but the commanding officer does have to mention about the fact that if they get shot down, which I think he was trying to say this in a joking way, which it's kind of funny, try to mix in with the locals, as this is Italy, or also very close to Germany. That's going to be very difficult for them. So it was a little bit funny. But they're also given special notes to give to the Germans in case they are captured. And so they head off. They attack the radar stations. Oh no, before that, one of the air groups, which is led, I think, by Jefferson, heads off to the attack. One of the planes isn't able to drop its fuel tanks, so the other pilot kind of shows him how to dislodge them in the air, or at least help them, drop off. The other pilot's able to do that, and they head off to the attack. They attack this radar station, but all of them get either killed or knocked out of the sky. And Jefferson and 3 other pilots are captured by the Germans. So they get taken away. One of them is Ncuti Gatwa. He's also been captured. They get put in front of one of the Luftwaffe officers, who tries to get information out of them. He also tries to use every tactic in the book, give them a cigarette, be nice to them, and then eventually getting where we all knew he was going to get, racism from America. And I like this scene because the black pilot pretty much says to them, yeah, it's bad, but where's better? And let's be honest, these are the... I can't say it, can I? These are the Germans in the 1940s. They weren't exactly friendly to black people. That's all I'm saying. Again, I would just think that at least, shows how loyal the Tuskegee Airmen were, which they were. Again, a country that was, getting better, but at the same time still had a lot of racism. They were loyal to that country still. So you have to commend them for that. So they get sent to the camp that Bucky and Buck are at, and Bucky and Buck have been struggling with being, Bucky has been struggling with being in the POW camp. He's trying to get Buck to escape with him, but Buck doesn't want to go. He just wants to survive the war and just wait until the Allies eventually free them. But unfortunately, Bucky just doesn't work that way. So the Tuskegee Airmen are dropped off in the camp. One of the pilots thanks them for helping defend them, or dealing with the Luftwaffe when they were on one of their missions. He helps the one who's seriously injured, because one of them, when they jumped out the plane, I think broke his neck, or at least damaged his neck. So he's like in a bit of a cast, being carried by the other 2. They then go to the officers' quarters because they are lieutenants. And when they are introduced to Buck and the other guys, you can see that, you can feel the tension in the room. Buck just gives them a nod and says, "Welcome to the, place," and yeah, they just settle down. Whilst they're dealing with this, they find out about, the D-Day invasion and how the camp is now being turned over to the SS because, well, the Germans are panicking. So now that the camp's been taken over by the SS, all the guys in command of the camp from the American side now realise they need to prepare for either an escape or an execution or a forced march. So they've got to get the men prepared, they've got to get the men tooled up, and they've got to get them ready to fight their way out if they have to. So whilst this is all going on, Buck manages to talk to Jefferson, who's a fantastic artist because he's able to sell his art to the other pilots for cigarettes or whatever they have on them. And when Buck has a conversation with him about, what Air Force he's with, and, telling him about, he has nothing personal against them, and he makes a joke about, knowing they're not spies, and Jefferson gets more relaxed around him. Buck notices the map that Jefferson's been drawing and how it's a map of Europe, and Buck then recruits him to join them on any escape attempt. But what they need from Jefferson is a much more clearer map so that they can plan an escape if they have to. So Jefferson works on that. The others work on, building weapons and training to kill the Germans if they have to. And, that's mainly how the episode goes on. And by the end, the Germans pretty much are, showing that they're on edge, tell the men to go to bed earlier and turn their lights out because it looks like the Russians are getting closer. And the episode ends with one of the Germans telling them to turn the lights off. And that's how the episode ends. Again, disappointing episode. These two stories should have been separated. They didn't need to be pushed together like this. I don't understand why Apple needed it to be 9 episodes. It should have been 12. If you're going to introduce the Tuskegee Airmen, and if you're going to do an episode about D-Day, both need to be respected. You could have had 2 epic episodes, but instead you just had a disappointing 1 episode that was rushed and was at parts boring. Oh, I did forget to mention the Cross Sandra stuff. End of the day, Cross gets, the cold shoulder from Sandra, who pretty much tells him to go back to his wife. And he then goes on a month vacation, I think. And that's how his story ends in this episode. So, yeah. 5 out of 10. Just gutted. And that's the end of my review. If you like this review, give it a like. If you dislike this review, give it a dislike. And if you have a comment, do think about leaving it below and I'll try to get back to it. And if you like my content, do subscribe. Entertainment Soldier. Bye.